I was on a flight from Mexico to Ecuador with my 2 young children. The kids and I were on the way to visit my family. It had been a while since I'd been back home. The plane was full, and everyone was excited to reach their destination. But things took a turn for the worse when we received a bomb threat. The captain announced that there was a bomb on board and that we had to make an emergency landing. Panic set in, and people started screaming and crying. I tried to remain calm for the sake of my children, but I was terrified. As we descended, I could see the fear in everyone's eyes. We landed safely, and the police came on board to search for the bomb. The air was charged with electricity and horror. Everyone was scrambling, and I'm sure thinking the worst thoughts, crying for their families. The cops looked diligently. They found nothing, and it turned out to be a fake threat from 2 teenage boys who thought it would be funny. Absolutely crazy. I personally was angry, but mostly relieved. But the damage had already been done for the majority. People were traumatized, and the rest of the flight was tense and uncomfortable. The boys were arrested, but that didn't bring back the sense of security that we had lost. The incident made me realize how fragile life is and how easily it can be taken away. It also made me appreciate the people in my life and the time that I have with them. I hugged my children tightly and promised myself that I would never take them for granted. The story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from one of the boys who had made the bomb threat. I understood that everyone on our flight received one. He apologized for what he had done and explained that he had been going through a tough time. He had lost his father to cancer, and he didn't know how to deal with the pain. I was moved by his letter, and I realized that we all make mistakes. We all have moments of weakness and desperation, but it's how we deal with those moments that define us. The story ends with the realization that even in the darkest of times, there is hope. We can find strength in each other and ourselves. We can overcome our fears and our pain and emerge stronger than ever before. This story is a reminder to cherish every moment of life and face each day with courage and determination, as we never know what tomorrow will bring.
The flight was uneventful until the passengers started to fall ill. At first, it was just a few people coughing and sneezing, but soon the entire plane was infected. The virus spread quickly, and the passengers began to panic. They were trapped on the plane with no way to escape. The flight attendants tried to calm them down, but it was no use. As the hours passed, the situation grew worse. The passengers were becoming more and more sick. Many on board started throwing up, and there was nothing anyone could do to help them. The flight attendants were also infected, and the pilots were struggling to keep the plane in the air. The passengers were terror-stricken, and they knew that they were going to die. They said their goodbyes to their loved ones and waited for the end to come. Suddenly, the plane began to shake violently. The passengers screamed as they realized that the plane was going down. They braced themselves for impact, but miraculously, the plane landed safely in a field. The passengers stumbled out of the plane, weak and disoriented. They were met by a team of doctors and scientists who had been waiting for them. They explained that the virus was a new, exotic strain of influenza that had never been seen before. No one knew how it had reached the plane that day, or even if it was purposely planted there. There was somebody on the flight that other people wanted to get rid of. And unfortunately, everyone else that happened to be on the aircraft was a happenstance victim, there for the ride. Since authorities couldn't nail down the former explanation, they chalked it up to that most likely one of the hundreds of people had innocently carried the menacing virus with them onto the large aircraft that day. But almost everyone knew that there was a greater, more sinister truth. In efforts to move forward, the conspiracy was left alone. The passengers were quarantined, and the doctors worked tirelessly to find a cure. It was a long and difficult process, but eventually, they were able to develop a vaccine that saved the lives of everyone on board. Everyone was able to recover in about 2 to 3 weeks and return to their individual, normal lives. But after such a horrendous, mysterious experience, life surely wasn't immediately normal. Right? I was a new pilot, and this was my first big commercial flight. I was nervous, but I knew that I had to stay calm and focused. Everything was going smoothly until we hit some turbulence. The plane started shaking violently, and the passengers began to scream. I tried to keep the plane steady, but it was no use. We were going down. I could see the ground getting closer and closer, and I knew that we were going to crash. But I refused to give up. I had a family to get back to. My wife Beck was 8 months pregnant with our first child, a girl. They were my motivation. But my profession was too. I had to save my passengers and crew. I pulled up on the controls again, and the plane started to level out, but it was still shaking uncontrollably. I could hear the engines straining, but I didn't stop. I kept pushing, and finally we were flying again. We would land safely. All would be well. Everyone would live. Woo. Thank God. But the danger wasn't over yet. I soon realized that someone had been trying to sabotage my flight. The plane had been tampered with, and I knew that I had to act fast. I called the control tower and told them what I discovered. They immediately dispatched a team of investigators to the airport, and they found the person responsible. It was Jose, a guy who had been weirdly jealous and competing with me during our time at flight school. He would be locked up forever. I continued to fly, and I was successful. My first flight after the incident was filled with anxiety, of course. But after I got that out of the way, my experiences were smooth for myself and everyone on board. I have learned to be very mindful. I advise people to always watch their back. You never know who has it out for you and is willing to put everyone's life on the line just to end yours.